going crazy over here, something going crazy over here between the two businesses. And I think that it's important, but I can't say that I've mastered that.
No, fair point. So what would you say maybe just from your observation are some of the reasons that other businesses, end up failing? Would you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a few things. It's that people are unwilling to pivot. So if I was so focused on just making a living with snakes, I would not have the open-mindedness to be able to pivot into media. I'm not blindly going after one thing, but I'm keeping open, the things that could happen. So it's the ability to pivot, but it's also the ability to just not give up. And it's corny, but you just have to keep on going. It's usually not the people who are successful are usually not the ones who had it made for them. They're not the ones who were lucky, any of that. It's really that they hit all the stuff that everyone hits, I think, in business, and they just kept going, or they were resourceful with what they were giving. A bad situation happened and they dealt with it. They didn't dwell on it. They didn't waste time. They took action and just never gave up.
Yeah. So what maybe are some of the roadblocks and or resources that you would advise people to be mindful of and take advantage of?
So definitely a resource would be, I never had a calendar before, but when you start getting really busy, like when you really need to have things allotted on a calendar, you can't be messing around with going all over the place. And that's something that I never kept in my life. And I just recently started probably 4 months ago or so. And it's made all the difference, whether it's, booking people for the podcast and knowing what's going on. But that's also kind of like a micro goal setting technique, I guess you could say, because it said that I get this done then, that done there. And it keeps me on path when I have a lot of different things going on. And roadblocks is that that plan's going to change too, because things are going to happen. The guy who I pay, something happened with Western Union and all that, and I need to figure out how to wire transfer to a Middle Eastern country and randomly at 10 a.m. in the morning, and then I'm there for half the day and go, damn, that calendar just obliterated. And I can't be mad that happened either, I got to keep on going too.
That's true. So how would you say that your personal values and belief systems play a role in what you do in business?
It's huge. Kind of like I mentioned before. I mean, I just want to put out good things, and I want to be the real deal per se. I don't want to be, there's too many people in every side of business that don't necessarily practice what they preach. They may tell you something and they're doing the opposite, or someone who, you get this all the time in the kind of self-help groups and stuff like that. Since we're both in like vetrepreneur groups and stuff like that, you get a lot of people who are acting as experts but haven't really done the thing. I want to be the person who has done the thing, and then later I can tell people this is how I did it, and there's no roadmap to this. Everyone's got their own path, but this is how I did it, and most importantly, we just kept going.
Sure. So what's something that you might wish that you had done a little bit differently that you've seen sort of, the hindsight's 2020? Is there something in particular?
There are definitely things as far as snakes go, but that's super, super specific to me. But I did have, this thing where I originally built up a collection, and then I built it up so quick that I wasn't able to manage things like illness in my collection and stuff like that. So I originally, when I actually dropped out of college to breed snakes, which, obviously made my mom cry a lot. And so I had built up a collection at that point of, maybe 30 or 40 animals. But when you have a bunch of animals at the same time, you can't properly, what we would call, quarantine all of them. And so one of the animals, at least one of the animals, had a virus that eventually spread to most of the collection that I had brought in at the time, which was rapidly expanding. So it ended up being like half my collection. And basically this virus, you can't, at least there's no way of curing it. And therefore my first few months of me deciding this is what I'm going to do, I basically lost everything. And that's something, and it really took me a while to get that back, to get that motivation back. I mean, by a while, I mean, like I didn't start building my collection back up to where it was. And I totally changed what I worked with until maybe 2 to 3 years after. So that was a huge point and huge learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as since you're a veteran, we'll kind of touch on a couple questions there. How did you personally face the transitioning portion there, and then going into entrepreneurship? How did you handle that transition?
Probably about as terrible as everyone else does. I mean, it's really difficult. But one thing that I maintained in the Army, and which I see a lot of people do, which is very dangerous, is they kind of build their whole persona or their whole self-worth, or they are a soldier, or they are the Army per se. And then when you lose all of that, then suddenly you're left empty and you don't feel like anything, and you don't have any meaning, you don't have any direction to go in. But I never saw myself as just a soldier. I was always trying to learn and be an entrepreneur while I was in the Army. And I knew that, hey, I'm going to do my time. I'm going to do this 6 years. And after that, it's total fair game. And that was like taking off the governor and saying, I can go full bore now. So I think it's important not to build your skills outside of, say, the military, and not let that be your full identity.
Sure. Yeah, and fair point there, because a lot of our brothers is we come back to the world, and I struggled with this. Is you come back to the civilian world, and you really don't fit in. You remember all the same faces, all the same sights and sounds and everything. It was all the same, but you're different, and you just don't really fit in the way that you did before. And it's like your self identity is kind of turned upside down. And
it's like you go through normal life, and then you randomly meet that veteran somewhere, and then you're like, oh, it's like the puzzle pieces going together, and there's not many people who you can connect with after that, because you have this weird shared experience that less than 1% of the population has or something, and there's just something to it, and there's not many ways to replace it, which is the hard part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Very true. So was it obvious to you, or did you kind of stumble upon the answers of how you transitioned?
Oh, no, nothing was ever obvious. I think what I did was I failed a lot. I mean, what I did first is I was a security guard. I was a logistics broker. I was a, what do you call it? I think it's Postmates driver. I delivered food. Basically, I just did a whole bunch of things and realized I hated a whole bunch of things while I was building my businesses and stuff on the side. But it was never an obvious, I can do this. I can make it a full-time business. I was confident and I wanted to do it, but it wasn't like it was so obvious out in front of me or anything. I can only really connect it going backwards. I don't know exactly what's in front of me.
Mm-hmm. So when you started the media part of your company, let's kind of talk about how you got started on that. That's an interesting side of your business, doing the media part. So maybe talk me through some of that process.
So the whole thing behind why I started the media is that my business, I wanted to make sure that if I'm going to produce animals, I'm going to be able to find qualified homes for them. I'm going to be able to sell them kind of at ease. And I kind of set up a boutique style of business as far as reptile breeding goes. So, there's a few ways to go about it. You can wholesale animals and work with very high numbers, or you can keep a smaller number of animals and really focus on the quality and the marketing and everything behind it. So I knew I wanted to start this boutique kind of business. And I knew that if I did that, I would need to market. And I knew that marketing in this age is podcasting, is YouTube, it is Instagram. So I started going really hard on all the social platforms because I knew that that would open up opportunities as far as my business goes. And then obviously it opened up other opportunities along the way. And then I try to pass that on to other entrepreneurs who are trying to get their foothold in the social game. So, there's no one really putting out newspaper ads anymore. You got to find a way to find your audience. And a lot of times that route is through the internet, through social platforms. People people hate social media. You'll hear a lot of people resist, but quite frankly, it's what's effective. And it may seem like too much time to take out, but it's slowly turning into, the most impactful thing you can do for your business.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair point there. Excuse me. So what compelled you to go into the snake business?
I don't know. It's something that I think it's important to look back on things that got you excited as a kid to kind of get a glimpse of what you're going to do in the future. So as a kid, luckily I was at the age where Steve Irwin came on the scene pretty much when I was elementary school. And he was obviously over the top character. And I don't get that from him. My personality is nowhere close to that. But it was something where his passion was just contagious for that and for the animals and everything like that. So I was just in love with snakes. My dad actually kept snakes since the 70s. So we had always at least a couple in the house. And honestly, my dad worked a lot. And one of the only things we did was go to reptile shows on the weekends and keep snakes together and stuff like that. And then as far as the media goes, I was making videos also. I made like a t-shirt company in middle school, and then I sponsored skateboarders and we made skate videos and stuff like that. So it's kind of a mesh of things that I did when I was little and somehow find a way as an adult to do these things and find joy in what I do for a living.
That's cool. Yeah, it's good to, do the things that you love because, like the saying goes, if you do what you love, then you never really work a day in your life. And so, following your passion is really a huge, the huge key to success and to really joy and happiness, I think.
Absolutely. And I think it's also a thing to where some days it does feel like work. Some days you don't want to do, there's constantly people messaging you about sales or doing stuff like that. It's not always the animals. Yeah. It's the sales I have to do. It's just the one-on-one interactions, just constantly talking to people. And I'm not a very, you may be mistaken throughout me talking on podcasts and stuff, but I'm actually not that outgoing. I'm pretty introverted. So sometimes it's a challenge for me to keep it going through social and stuff like that. So it's not always, because when you start a business, it's not always what you think it's going to be, as far as you end up wearing so many different hats. And it's not only playing with snakes, it's also selling snakes and talking to customers and helping them out.
Well, that's true. So is there any other kind of profession out there that you would entertain doing at some point?
I don't want to ever say never because I kind of follow what catches my interest. So I actually had someone on my podcast who was talking about making planted enclosures for snakes and stuff like that. So yesterday I started going down this crazy rabbit hole of finding plants that I could put in enclosures and plant stuff. So who knows, I may be selling plants in 5 years or something, but quite frankly, it's not going to be a profession. It's hard for me to fit into a certain box. I don't think I'll ever be the 9 to 5. I've tried that a bunch and it hasn't really worked out. I think I never get fired, but I quit pretty, my tolerance is low for doing things over and over again and monotony and stuff like that. And I think that's probably the same with a lot of people in the military. Part of why you like going in the military is that things are usually always